Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Of course, back here with David. Got a pretty exciting announcement. I'm going to let David take the glory, but we've got a special advisor joining the board. First things first, David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Jason. How about you?
Yeah, good, good. It's been a great week. Bit busy week, but hey, we got a spicy news release to kick it off. So here, I'll throw it to you. Do you want to kind of intro, of course, what who they are, what they're going to be doing for Vaxil?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, we're really thrilled that Mike is joining us, Dr. Michael Berelowitz, longtime Pfizer exec. I've known him for many years. Um, a wonderful human being, which I think is first and foremost the most important thing, but also an expert in many things. And over the years, one of his areas of responsibility also included vaccines. He's worked in oncology. His background is in diabetes originally. That when I first met him, we did some stuff in diabetes together. But since then, he's moved on and increasingly bigger responsibilities at Pfizer, took over lots of other different areas. So he's going to be able to add a lot of knowledge to our approach, to our science, and how we try to eventually commercialize these products. Um, and it's also just a really exciting, I would say, vote of confidence that he's willing to invest his time in us and share his knowledge with us. But he'll be able to help us on many fronts. One of the things that I look forward to getting some help from him on is also in how we articulate our message about our unique platform, because I think signal peptides are not well known, not very well understood. So it's helpful to have an extra brain, a really good one at that, to help us out in articulating our messages clearly so that we get to the right people with the right message about what we're able to do.
Yeah, I mean, the guy had a star-studded resume. Obviously, you guys attached it in the press release. I do encourage people to have a look. I mean, the biggest thing, of course, we take out, former head of clinical development. That was, of course, a huge part. And then also in the press release, you guys did mention that the mice were challenged. A few days ago, you released the news on Monday. So just to give people some insight there, obviously, incredible guy joining the board. Hopefully, can help help with the clinical development. So
Exactly.
here, I guess going forward, we were getting some questions about the mice being challenged. First things first, do you want to kind of intro it, and then we'll go through some of the questions that I grabbed from people?
Yeah, so maybe just a quick high level in case people missed out. A challenge experiment, or sometimes it's called a protection experiment, is when in a vaccination example, you vaccinate the animals in a way where they have also enough vaccine on board and also enough time for the immune system to respond. And then you expose them to the pathogen. And basically, you hope that the animals that were vaccinated do better than the ones that were not. So that's the general design of that experiment.
Awesome. And we're getting questions, and I know we need to chat in kind of general terms, and there's a lot of factors, but people are saying, what's the next steps for now? Okay, great. The mice were challenged. What's next? Do you want to kind of give some insight on what the next steps, not necessarily could be, but on a general standpoint of other things you've seen?
Yeah, so generally speaking, you challenge the animals and then wait for them to respond to the disease or the pathogen, in this case to COVID-19. And we will we will be watching carefully and analyzing what we see and looking for the progress of the disease in these animals. When we get the results, there are several ways it can go. And we don't assume anything before we get them. But in general, when one does a study like this, the next thing that you would want to do is try to advance toward the clinical stages of the development of the product. If you see good enough results, that would generally be what you'd want to do. And the results can be on a whole continuum of possibilities. So we'll wait and see what the results are before we announce what our next steps are. And we're, of course, as we mentioned last week when we spoke, Jason, we're still, very interested in pursuing our oral delivery, and the combination of the USAMRIID plus what we decide to do and how we decide to progress that oral delivery approach. Hopefully, they come together at some point.
Yeah. No, awesome. I think that was a good answer. Going on with more challenge questions, we got one here. For the challenge, was there one or more vaccine candidates used? Do you want to kind of give again a kind of broader answer, maybe to people that are asking?
Yeah, sure. So for all sorts of reasons, we haven't yet disclosed exactly what's in our vaccine. So I don't want to get into the nitty gritty details of it. But suffice it to say that when you're developing any product, whether it's a therapeutic or a vaccine, you want to make sure that you have a lead candidate. To get to that lead candidate, one would generally evaluate several options. And then one should always have backup candidates. So we understand what's needed to bring a product to market. So I think that's probably the closest I can get to answering that question.
Cool. No, I think that was an awesome answer. Here, to hop into some other questions that we were seeing, I got a question here. What are the pros and cons of some of the latest vaccines? Have you been looking at what's kind of coming out on the market, and do you have any insight?
Basically, generally there are four categories of technology out there in this COVID-19 landscape. The leading one that we hear the most about is the mRNA technology. These technologies, including there's a little bit of DNA out there, but it's mostly the mRNA. And even then, there aren't that many pursuing this approach. This is a completely new technology. By the way, so is ours. Ours is completely new as well. Ours sits within another category called protein-based vaccines. And there are people looking at peptides. And sometimes I get questions from people, or I get people who send me great articles about peptide treatments and therapeutics and vaccines. But we're not a regular peptide, we're a signal peptide. And it's a very specific part of the peptide that actually acts in a very different way. So the advantages of our technology are around the fact that when we see, and this is a hot topic these days, we see that there are mutations happening, the region of the signal peptide does not tend to mutate. Whereas if you look at the spike protein in general and the mRNA vaccines that are out there, they're targeting a part of the sequence that does mutate. We've seen evidence that it's mutating. And if you look at, for instance, the South African variant, it's mutated in a way that appears to be more significant clinically. Um, those mutations are going to keep happening, right? This is a virus's attempt to stay relevant and alive, and they will fight to do that. The SP, the signal peptide region, does not tend to mutate. And if we look at the mutations, the major mutations that are out there that we see clinically, we don't see, in some of them, we don't see any mutation in the signal peptide region. And in some of them, the mutations are very minor and not part of the base. So that's that's one of the things that makes us very different from, let's say, other peptide, but also most of the other vaccines out there. We also have a technology in our vaccine that's targeting more than just the spike protein, whereas most of what's out there is targeting the spike. There are two other categories that are related to viruses. One's called viral vector, where sort of piggyback on the virus, and the other one is the actual COVID virus itself that's either killed or weakened and then injected and generates the immune response. And those are the more traditional types of vaccines that we see, for instance, in flu and some of the other areas.
Oh, I like you talked about, of course, the variants and really what you see as the pros or the advantages of what you guys are looking at. And I think you did an amazing job. So thank you for that. Uh, Kind of the next question here. We always get people asking, is David talking to other pharmas? Is part of your week spent updating other types of institutions or big pharmas? And then this one, which I thought was interesting, added on. Are other big pharmas curious about what Vaxil is doing? I know it's hard to give a straight answer, but I'd love to know. Is this on your radar? Do you have conversations with some of these bigger institutions?
So yeah, I spend a lot of my day on calls with all different kinds, from let's say pharmas, big, small, potential manufacturers, potential funders, all different kinds of bodies, government, private, et cetera, nonprofits, trying to see how we can best generate interest and progress the technology. there's a lot of competition out there, right? Everybody's trying to go after the same players, and the COVID space has become pretty crowded. So there's a lot of work to do here, and distinguishing ourselves, differentiating, as that previous question asked, that's really critical here. So I do spend quite a bit of time doing that, working on that, and I think hopefully down the road that will pay off when we have some good results to show.
Carrying on, you mentioned COVID's getting crowded. I know we get questions, and so I'd love to ask. You talk about peptides, talk about signal peptides. Do you want to go into really the long term game for Vaxil? Of course, the goal is we have a COVID vaccine, but the goal I want to, and we've chatted before, but is the goal also to prove the science and maybe chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, definitely the part of the goal is to prove the science, and part of the goal is to broaden the platform so that we have more than one egg in the basket. So, you asked earlier about just specifically the COVID vaccine, and I said, look, when you go forward, you make sure you have multiple candidates, right? So if you go up a level from that, I want to make sure that we don't just have one product. So that's why we continue our work in oncology, and we continue our work in other infectious diseases. We did some work a while ago in tuberculosis, and we'll continue to expand and explore in that area. We're also always enhancing our tools for discovery so that we can make that process work better. And that's the long story. The long story is to take the technology, prove it, get people interested, and then get it out there where it can work. It won't work everywhere. It's not a panacea. It will not cure all problems, but our lead candidate in cancer is a MUC1 signal peptide that has a lot of potential for a lot of different cancer targets where MUC1 is a key element of it. And in infectious diseases, not all pathogens present signal peptides. So we have to look carefully, make sure we see ones, and this is where we're developing these tools and continuing to develop them, and identify the right SPs for the right pathogen that have the highest likelihood of having impact. And the main thing is to generate more and more data to prove that the platform works, and especially out into the clinic to make sure we can improve people's lives.
Fantastic answer, David. Again, thanks so much for joining. I know a lot of great questions, a lot of great answers. And I invite other people, of course, who are watching these to drop your questions below. We do like to mix in a bunch of them, what seems like every week now, which is fantastic. And I think you had a great answer there, and we can talk about on other videos about some of the other use cases for the science and the technology. So, David, thanks so much for joining. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we close things off?
Nope. Just going to wish everybody good health and stay safe, be careful. And I look forward to next time, Jason.
Perfect. Well, I'll see you next time.